Good morning, everyone. How in the world are you? Great to have you back. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is what I call Morning Musings. I'm sharing with you some thoughts on the resurrection in response to some questions and requests by you, those of you who watch my morning musings. And my premise is this. It's axiomatic. It's virtually indisputable. The resurrection, i.e. at the end of the age, the second coming and judgment, would be to overcome the death of Adam. The death of Adam, whatever it is the problem. If, therefore, biological death is not the death of Adam, then pretty clearly the resurrection at the end of the age is not the solution, biologically speaking. What I've been doing is sharing with you some thoughts that demonstrate that the death that God threatened Adam and Eve with, the death that they experienced that very day, was in fact what we sometimes refer to as spiritual death. Sometimes I don't even like the term. Covenantal death, fellowship death, perhaps are better terms, but spiritual is a handy terms. You know what's remarkable to me is that some people seemingly deny any spiritual significance to what happened in Genesis 2 and 3 in their headlong desire to find a physical problem. Of course, there are some who deny that man has any kind of spiritual life. And this is really lamentable, of course. But the bottom line is, once again, God threatened Adam and Eve, in the day you eat, you will surely die. Now, here's what happens. And I call this the yeah, but type of approach to Genesis 2 and 3. There are many who would say, and in fact, for some 19 years, I had a booth at the Abilene Christian University lectureship. And there I would engage all sorts of people, and I would ask them, did God threaten Adam and Eve with death the very day they ate the fruit? Well, invariably the people would say, well, of course he did. That's what the text says. I would then ask, did Adam and Eve die the day they ate the forbidden fruit? And do you realize that almost 80%, and this by actual count, I kept track for many years, almost 80% would say, well, no, they didn't die that day. As the old saying goes, Houston, we have a problem. When they would realize what that meant, they would then say, well, yeah, Adam and Eve died spiritually. That is, they were cast out of the presence of the Lord. And folks, if we don't realize that life only exists in the presence of the Lord, in fellowship with Him, then we don't even understand one of the most fundamental truths of all of the Bible. To deny that is just simply, I'm sorry, it's misguided, it's illogical, it's as wrong can be. Life is to be found only in the presence of God. So were Adam and Eve cast out of the presence of God that day. So when I would ask the people who would come by my booth, did Adam and Eve die that day? They would say, well, yeah, they died spiritually, but they didn't die physically. Now, first of all, that interjects two deaths into the text. God didn't say you will die twice. He didn't say you'll die once today. Oh, and that's not really the big issue. The real issue is the fact that one of these days you will die biologically. Now look at what that does to the language. God said, in the day you eat, you will surely die. They died spiritually, covenantally. They lost fellowship with God that very day. We're supposed to then understand that the language that said, in the day you eat, you will surely die, then turns around and doesn't mean in the day you eat you will surely die, but all of a sudden becomes some kind of vague, ambiguous, nebulous, elastic, plastic, stretchy, gooey language that says, well, one of these days, sometime, if you eat the fruit, then at some point of time, who knows when, perhaps hundreds of years later, then you'll die. So, the exact same language supposedly does mean, in the day you eat, you will die covenantally. And they did die covenantally, i.e. spiritually, that very day. But again, then, we're supposed to believe that the identical words mean something totally unrelated to, in the day you eat, you will surely die. And all of a sudden becomes totally ambiguous, totally elastic, totally meaningless for all practical purposes' sake. In the day you eat becomes whenever you happen to do it. And in the day you eat, you will surely die, simply becomes one of these days, who knows when, you'll die. Folks, let me be real honest here. That's some unwarranted, unjustified linguistic gymnastics. It really amounts to nothing more than semantic sophistry. What linguistic, what grammatical, what contextual justification is there for saying, well, yes, the language of in the day you eat you will surely die was fulfilled in that very day, but, but that same language meant something totally, radically different biologically from what it meant spiritually. There's no justification for that. So if we acknowledge that Adam and Eve died a covenantal death that day, they were cast out of the fellowship of God that day, which is incontrovertible. You know, those who want to deny the reality of spiritual life are simply denying the reality of what happened that day. So, if we acknowledge the reality of their spiritual death that very day, then we have no justification for saying, yeah, but the real purpose and the real focus of God's threat was something that didn't happen that day, but happened hundreds of years later. See, it really makes no sense at all. It turns language on its head, and it distorts the meaning of God's threat. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll see you on the flip side.